All right, everybody, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Be'ezrat Hashem, tonight we're going to be studying Parashat Vaera. Be'ezrat Hashem, we're learning tonight for the complete and speedy recovery of Shachar ben Chana and also Yaakov Yisrael Avram ben Chana Esther Helen. May their neshamot go higher and higher. May they, Be'ezrat Hashem, have a flash them of course. Also for the Nishmat Menashe ben Yaakov, Giti bat Yaakov, Liel Dina bat Ephraim. May their neshamot go higher and higher in Gan Eden, and there should be Melitze Yosher for all of us and for all of Klal Yisrael. So I saw a beautiful, beautiful chidush from Rav Yaakov Galinsky, which I'd like to share with you tonight. A very, very interesting thing that I saw from him. He says the following idea: we know that the majority of the plagues that we have in this week's parasha, majority of the 10 plagues are in this week's parasha. And it's important to talk about them, which B'ezrat Hashem we will. But before we get to that, we have to talk about what led up to those plagues. And there was a very interesting give and take between Moshe and Aaron and Paro. And this has to do with the concept of sorcery and black magic that took place. We know that Hashem gave Moshe a couple of signs in last week's parasha. And one of those signs was that his staff would turn into a snake. And in this week's parasha, when Moshe and Aaron approach the Paro, so they want to show that they really have Hashem on their side. So they do this kind of act, which is that that Aaron throws his staff on the ground, and it becomes a snake. The sorcerers of Paro then throw their staffs on the ground and it becomes snakes, and Aaron's staff eats up their staffs and becomes back into a stick again. Now, this is something that is very interesting. The pasuk in the Torah says, "Velo shat libo." Paro did not pay attention to this. It didn't do anything for him. It didn't change anything for him. He didn't think anything of it. So Rabbi Ovadia Sforno says that Paro didn't pay attention to the difference between what Aaron did and what his sorcerers did. Aaron's staff actually changed into a snake, but the sorcerers, the way that their staffs changed into snakes, that was just achizat enayim. It was just something that appeared like it, but it wasn't real. Very interesting idea from the Sforno, but it goes a little bit deeper. The concept is, even if it was real, let's examine a very interesting idea over here. The Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Samech Zayin Amud Bet, tells over a very interesting story about a man, a great sage in the Talmud. His name was Zeiri. Zeiri was once in Alexandria in Egypt, and he purchased a donkey. And he's about to leave the city. It says the Gemara, he took the donkey to drink water. And as the donkey is drinking water, some crazy transformation happens, and the donkey all of a sudden becomes a plank of wood. And he's stunned. He says, "What's going on over here? The donkey becomes a plank of wood. What's happening?" He goes back to the people that sold him the donkey, and he says, "Guys, I don't know what just happened. I bought a donkey from you. I took it to drink water, and I drank the water, it became a plank of wood. What happened? What's going on over here?" So said the salesman to Zeiri, he said, "You have to understand, people in Egypt, they are very, very involved in black magic, in sorcery. And it's a well-known fact that whenever you buy something in Egypt, you have to take it to the water to drink. You have to check it with water. The water will reveal whether or not it was bewitched or if it's real. So yes, we're going to give you a refund because you're Zeiri, the big rabbi. But the average guy, you should know, doesn't get refunds for these things. He would have lost his money. Why? Because of the fact that it's a known thing that you're supposed to check the items that you purchase with water to make sure that it's a real item and not witchcraft. This is what the Gemara says in Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Samech Zayin Amud Bet. Then, and Rashi says over there a key point. Very important to remember this Rashi in order to understand the next part. Rashi says, "Shakshafim nivdakim al yedei mayim chayim," which means that kshafim, sorcery, witchcraft, can be checked through mayim chayim, which means water of a spring or water that is natural. In other words, water that's flowing naturally. Okay, so that kind of water can check to see whether something was made of sorcery or whether it was a real thing. Now, the Gemara then goes on to say something very interesting. There was a man by the name of Yanai. Yanai was in a hotel, and he was sitting down. He wanted to get some water, so the waitress was bringing him some water. And as she was bringing the water, he notices her lips are moving. Okay. Lips are moving, quite odd. What's going on over here? So he figures maybe she's doing some kind of witchcraft. So Yanai takes the water, spills it onto the ground, and all of a sudden 2 scorpions come out from this water. He was kind of stunned. So Yanai figured, you know what? Let them have a taste of their own medicine. He says, I drank your water. Let me give you some of mine. So this waitress agreed. She drank some of the water, and she turned into a donkey. Again, this is a Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin. She became a donkey, and this Yanai rode her all the way to the marketplace. She had a friend that saw what happened, and she said, I got to save my friend. So she went, she did some kind of witchcraft, and she got her back to being a regular lady. And all of a sudden, they see Yanai is riding on top of this lady. That's another story. In the same page on the Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin Daf Samech Zayin Amud Bet. The problem with these 2 stories is that they're a contradiction. The first story told us that water is something that is, not only is it not something that becomes bewitched, but it checks and it reveals whether something else is bewitched. It reveals whether something else witchcraft has touched it or not. That donkey, when it drank the water, it became a plank of wood, because really it was a plank of wood that was bewitched. Over here, this water itself became under the control of the sorcery. So how does that work out? I thought water doesn't get under the control of sorcery. This is the question that is posed by Rabbi Yankel Galinsky. Very interesting question that he asks. So Rabbi Yankel Galinsky brings down from Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margaliot. He says a very interesting answer, and it's based on something from Maran HaChida. Maran HaChida, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Yosef David Azulai, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, asked another question. And this question has to do with the Gemara in Masechet Brachot on Daf Tet Amud Bet. The Gemara in Masechet Brachot over there has a question. The question is, Eliyahu Hanavi had a very famous encounter with the Nevi'ei HaBaal, the prophets of the Baal, the people who were worshiping the Baal, claiming that the Baal was a god and that we should sacrifice things to the god and we should bow down to this Baal, this idol. And Eliyahu Hanavi had an encounter with them, and he told them, Rabotai, this is not the way that it works. Your God is sleeping. You're offering sacrifices and nothing is doing. He's not answering you. He's not calling down to you. He's not nothing. He's not consuming anything. But let me show you how it's done, Eliyahu said. He started laughing at them on Mount Carmel. Eliyahu Hanavi went ahead and he built an altar, and it says that he offered up sacrifices, and he built around this altar a big trench. So there's an altar where he's about to offer up the animals as a sacrifice to Hashem, and surrounding the altar, he made a big circle, a trench, and he put lots of water inside of it, inside of that trench. And then he said, Aneni Hashem Aneni. This is where we get the famous prayer on Slichot. Anenu, right? Anenu. Anenu Hashem Anenu. Where does this come from? Eliyahu Navi on Hara Carmel. So why did he have to say Anenu 2 times? Asked the Talmud. So the Gemara says the answer is because Aneni Hashem, Eliyahu Navi is asking, first of all, Hashem, I want your fire to come down from Shamayim. Answer me that your fire should come down from Shamayim and it should consume this sacrifice that I'm offering. Number 2, I want it to be that the people that see this should not think that I'm performing sorcery, should not think that I'm doing witchcraft, but they should understand that it's from you, Hashem. So that's why Eliyahu Navi said, Aneni Hashem, Aneni. This is the Gemara in Masechet Brachot Daf Tet Amud Aleph. So asks Maran Achida, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, why is it so that Eliyahu Hanavi was worried that it would be kshafim? Think about it. We just learned in this previous Gemara that whenever there's water, so we said that water is something that checks and it reveals whether something was done through witchcraft or not. Water is something that, like we said, this donkey drank this water from Zeiri, and all of a sudden it became a plank of wood. Why? Because water checks to see if it's witchcraft or not. So then says the Maran Achida, I don't understand. If that's the case, why would Eliyahu Navi be worried people would think that this is sorcery, that this is witchcraft? The problem over here is it wouldn't be witchcraft. Everybody knows there's water, there's a trench full of water surrounding the altar that I built, so people shouldn't think that it's witchcraft. Says Maran Achida, that's a big mistake. The answer to this question is because what kind of water did Rashi tell us will check things to make sure that it's not witchcraft? Water that's Mayim Chaim, water from a live spring, like a spring or a river, flowing water naturally that comes, that's just flowing, that's Mayim Chaim. And therefore, that can check to see if things are a sorcery or witchcraft. But water that's Mayim Shuvim, water that was drawn out in a bucket and placed in a new location, like the water that Yanai had in his cup from this waitress, or that Eliyahu Navi drew water and put inside of the trench around his altar, that water is not able to go ahead and check to see if something is sorcery. As a matter of fact, this kind of water could become water that is under the control of witchcraft and sorcery itself. Now, here's where this comes back to our parasha. So that's why Eliyahu Navi said that I'm worried they're going to think that it's witchcraft, because the fact that I have water here, they know that water could become bewitched, because this is water that's drawn out. It's not water that's Mayim Chaim. Now, here's the key. Aharon and Moshe come back to Paro the following day. And Hashem tells them, go to Paro and make sure that he sees you. Now, Paro was out in the river. Why was he in the river? Because he was putting on this show as if he's God, and he doesn't have to use his bodily functions, and he's pretending that he has to bathe. And while he's bathing, while nobody could see under the water, he was relieving himself. So he's going out to do something that even gods do. They like to bathe in the Nile River. Meanwhile, he's relieving himself. Now, Aaron and Moshe have to go and tell him that we know what you're doing, first of all, but this is a hidden message over here, but much more than what meets the eye. Aaron is now commanded to go ahead and put this staff in the water. Now, over here, this was the staff. I always had this question. It specifically says, Hashem tells Aaron, the staff, asher ne'epach lenachash, the staff that turned into a snake, tikach beyadecha, take this staff in your hand. Why does the Torah have to mention that? I've always had this question. It's almost like superfluous. Take the staff. We know what happened with the staff. That was the staff that Aaron just yesterday put on a whole show for us. We all know the story. Why did we have to learn? Why does Hashem have to say, take the staff that became a snake and bring it to Paro? What was the purpose? Says Rabbi Galinsky over here, we have an incredible lesson now. What's Aaron going to do with the staff? He's going to put it in the water. He's going to bring the plague of blood. When Aaron puts this staff in the water, what kind of water is it? It's Mayim Chaim. It's the Nile River. If it were true that this staff was witchcraft, that this staff was sorcery, then this staff automatically would have been checked by the Mayim Chaim. It would have been revealed that this staff is zero, that this staff is garbage. But the fact is that this staff was put into that water and nothing happened. Says Rabbi Galinsky, you see over here an incredible idea. It was very clear to Paro. There was a message here being given to Paro. You think that we're doing witchcraft. You think that we're doing sorcery. You think we're playing games. we're not playing games. This is by far greater than your witchcraft and your sorcery. This is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's something that Paro saw with his own two eyes. By him taking the staff that became a snake, he was shown that what happened yesterday, that this staff became a snake, it wasn't sorcery, it wasn't witchcraft, it wasn't all the stuff that you and your people do, but rather it was truly a miracle from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that became clear when Aaron put the staff in the water. And again, same thing. If Aaron puts the staff in the water to make the plague of blood, it's not going to happen. If it's real sorcery or witchcraft, the water is going to check it. The water is going to change it back to what it really is. It's real Mayim Chaim. And the point here is, the key in all of this is that Paro knows this. That's the key. He knows, he understands everything that they're telling him. He gets the message that everything that he knows to be true is a lie. That's the most important part here. He knows, he understands, he's been proven that over here, this is not sorcery. You know what happens to things that are sorcery and witchcraft when you put it in Mayim Chaim. It goes like that. There's nothing left of it. But over here, did that happen to my staff that I turned into a snake yesterday? No, it didn't happen. So what do you see? You see that it's real. It's not sorcery. It's not witchcraft. Now, over here, we get a deeper insight, says Rabbi Yankele Galinsky, into who is Paro. What we find over here is so scary. You have somebody who knows the truth. He knows what's right and what's wrong. He understands. He plays it as if. He says, Mi Hashem, who is Hashem that I should listen to him? I should bother with this being? I've never heard of Hashem. I don't know what you're talking about. He plays it up as if. He plays it up as if there's something here that he doesn't know. He plays it up as if, oh yeah, you're just sorcerers. You're coming to Egypt to teach us sorcery. We have sorcery for a long time already. But he knows the truth. He knows that it's not just sorcery. He knows that it's real from Hashem. And this is the scary point that we see from here. It's possible to be fully aware of what's going on and to completely ignore it, to live in a lie. That's scary. Paro in the Haftarah over here is going to say something amazing. The pasuk that is quoted about Paro is that he says, Li Yeor, he says, to me is the Yeor, to me is the river, Va'ani asitini, and I made myself. That, Rabotai, is a scary thought. Somebody knows that he's not a god, but he actually is going around saying he is. He says, I am the Nile River. I am the one that created the Nile River. I created myself. Li Yeor va'ani asitini. How does somebody reach that point? How does somebody get to that point, Rabotai? It's so important to understand that lo shat libo gam lezot. There are messages that come from Hashem. Hashem sends a person wake-up calls, but the person is not willing to pay attention. He gets one wake-up call, he gets another wake-up call, and he's just not willing to pay attention. And the scariest part of this is that we are not that far off from Paro. Meaning, obviously we're not the same as him, God. He was a wicked man, wicked Rasha. But Paro over here, the Rambam writes, Paro is a mashal for the Yetzer Hara. Paro represents the evil inclination. The problem with Paro, as we see it right now, is that he can be shown the truth, proven the truth, and completely choose to reject it and live in a total lie. He can go ahead and say, yes, I see what you're saying, and I completely could care less. Even though it's true, I don't want to know from it. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to know from it. I want to totally reject it. He would prefer to live in a lie. Rabotai, this is a huge problem for us because often enough, we as well find ourselves in the same boat. We know, for example, just how bad it is to speak Lashon Hara. We're told about the fact that Lashon Hara is it corresponds to the three cardinal sins for which a person should give up his life. We know that all the person's mitzvot go to the guy that you're talking about, and all the person's averot from that person come to you. We know how bad it is. But sometimes, even though we know the truth, we still go ahead and we do it anyway. We know how embarrassing it will be after 120 when a person goes up to Shamayim and Hashem tells him, you didn't set aside time to learn Torah. We know that that's the truth. We know that's the case. Hashem will say, what about, Mishnayot? What about Chumash? What about Navi? Something. And we know that there's going to be a day where it's Oy lanu me'elbona shel Torah. Woe unto us from the embarrassment that the Torah says he didn't take the time to sit and learn me. We know that. The Chazal teach us that. We believe in that. And yet we reject it. We say, I don't have time, I can't, I this, I that. We make up all kinds of excuses. We know it's called living in a lie, Rabotai, where we know what's going to be, we know where things are headed, and we do it anyway. To each on his level. Again, why am I saying that Paro is a mashal for the Yetzer Hara? Because that's really what the Yetzer Hara does. He creates a world of imagination, a world where nothing really that is true comes to you, means anything to you. And that's something which is very scary. That's what he did to Paro. That you could have somebody who knows that he's going to the bathroom in private so that people don't see. He knows that he's hiding from everybody. And he's still playing it up as if he's God. He knows it. He knows he's not God, but he's telling everyone that he is. He knows that this is not sorcery that's in front of him. He knows it's from Hashem. And still he completely rejects it, unwilling to see the truth. Why? Because it's just not comfortable. It's not convenient for him at that moment. And we all have to ask ourselves in the same way, do we do that? And on what level? And how much? And what can we do to fight it? Even if it's just a small little bit to combat that, right? It's so important for us in every aspect. So that was a beautiful chidush that I saw from Rabbi Yankel Galinsky, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, which I thought was very important to share with all of you. Because, like I said, often enough, we find ourselves in the same category. Now, I wanted to point out a few more things. Number one, the pasuk says, "Vayomer Elokim." We start off with the name Elokim. Not Hashem, but rather Elokim speaks to Moshe. Elokim represents judgment. Why judgment? What happened over here? Judgment means that something wrong took place. So over here, the pasuk starts off with Elokim. I saw again from Maran Achida. Amazing. He says, in the end of last week's parasha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe to go to Paro. And from that moment on, Paro says, listen up. Because of this, the Jews are obviously not working hard enough. They're complaining. They want to go to worship Hashem in the desert. That means they've got too much time on their hand to complain about all these things. You know what we're going to do? We're going to give them more work. We're going to make it harder for them to accomplish their work, and therefore they'll be more occupied with their time, less time to think about this nonsense. So Moshe Rabbeinu hears that. People are very upset. They can't finish their work, and now they have an even harder time. And Moshe tells Hashem, Lama hareota lama zeh, lama zeh shelachtani. Why did you do bad to this nation? Why did you send me? Umeaz bati el Paro ledaber mishmecha. From the time that I came to Paro to speak in your name, it became worse for this nation. You didn't save your people. So Hashem says, okay, you'll see what's going to happen. But meanwhile, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't trust the judgment of Hashem. Now, for that reason, says Maran Achida, Hashem uses the word Elokim in this week's parasha. And Elokim spoke to Moshe with harsh judgment. Elokim is Rashi Tevot Amarta. You said, Lama hareota. Why did you do bad to this nation? To me, you told me those words. Yehoshua machnisa. Because of that, Yehoshua is going to be the one to bring in the Jewish people to the land of Israel. Because you said words that you should not have said. How frightening. Here's a person, he's trying to do something good for the Jewish people. He wants for their benefit, and Hashem is speaking to him, and it goes exactly the opposite of the way it was supposed to go. It becomes worse and worse. And Moshe says, why did you do bad to these people? So that's why Hashem uses the word Elokim in this week's parasha, because Elokim is Rashi Tevot Amarta. You said, Lama hareota, why did you do bad to this nation? Because of what you said, Yehoshua machisam. Yehoshua is going to be the one to bring the Jewish people into Israel, not you. Very powerful, from Maran Achida. That's why it's so important, as hard as it may be, in different challenging situations, to be willing to accept the judgment of Hashem. There are some times where it's very hard, very difficult, not easy to do so, but we have to do that. We have to accept the judgment of Hashem. And that's something which was expected of Moshe, apparently, and to a certain level, to a certain degree, Moshe Rabbeinu was rebuked for saying those words, Lama Hariota, why did you do bad to the Jewish people? Now, another interesting point, Moshe Rabbeinu is told that he has to go ahead and he has to speak to Paro with honor. There's a special pasuk, Rashi tells us, where Hashem commands Moshe and Aaron to speak with honor to the king of Egypt. You always have to give kavod to the kingdom, to the monarchy. And over here, this begs the question, why? Here's this guy, this guy was like a Nazi. 300 babies in the morning that he slaughtered, 300 babies at night that he slaughtered, all the babies that he threw into the river, all the torture, all the slavery. This guy, you have to give him respect. What respect? Why does the Torah say that when Moshe and Aaron had to go talk to Paro, there had to be respect when they spoke to him? So very interesting answer from the Khatam Sofer. It's got nothing to do with the respect needed for Paro. Look at the incredible lesson we could see from here. Says the Khatam Sofer, when somebody gets disrespected, and he's somebody who usually receives respect from people, so that disgrace that he endured, that disgrace that he went through, is a kapara for him. It atones for him. So here's a person, usually people show him the utmost respect, and instead of getting that respect, this guy completely disrespects him. That's so hurtful, it's so painful, that bizayon, that disgrace that he went through will atone his sins. It will be mechaper for him. So over here, an incredible lesson that Moshe and Aaron are told, don't disrespect him. Why? Because Hashem says, I want to bring 10 plagues on this guy. I want to make his nation crumble. If you disrespect him, the disgrace that he will suffer, the embarrassment that he will suffer, could potentially atone for everything that he did wrong. Amazing. So therefore, you would be killing the whole plan, says the Khatam Sofer. So over here, Abutai, we see an incredible lesson. It's such an important thing to think about, that when a person goes through embarrassment, as painful as it is, as hurtful as it is, but at the same time, you understand what you just got. In a sense, you almost just hit the jackpot, because that atones for so much of a person's sins. Imagine that the Khatam Sofer is telling us the reason that Moshe and Aaron had to be respectful to Paro is because if they would be disrespectful, that would atone for everything he did wrong, and there would be no 10 plagues. Can you imagine all the things that Paro did wrong? Gone, clean slate, because he was disrespected by these two people? It's a tremendous lesson for us to understand. And it helps us when we go through, God forbid, moments of embarrassment, that somebody hurts us, insults us, says something not nice. You can take that moment and use it for something very positive. There's a story I heard once about such a situation where there was a person who was very, very ill, and the doctors had told him that he was not going to make it. And he went through, I believe it was Rav Chaim Kanievsky, for a blessing. And Rav Chaim said, you need a very special blessing, a very special type of bracha. He says, you need to get a blessing from somebody that suffered a tremendous level of embarrassment and didn't respond. He didn't fight back. He just kind of absorbed it, and that was that. So he said, where am I going to get such a bracha? And he was a little bit down about it. Meanwhile, fast forward, that evening there was a wedding in Bnei Brak at one of these halls, and there was a beautiful celebration, and in walked some guy from out of nowhere that had some kind of issue with one of the Baalei Simcha, either the father of the Chatan or the father of the Kala, and he decided that now is his time to ruin this guy's party, and he made a whole big scene. He started to yell at the person, scream at you're having a party while you did this to me and you did that to me. And he starts to just unload on this person in front of everybody. and he really publicly embarrassed the person. Now, this person, the father of the kalan or the chatan, is just shocked, and he can't believe, and he's livid that the person would have the audacity in the middle of his wedding to come and to just say what he said publicly and to do it. I mean, he was about to unleash on the guy. Meanwhile, this person who was ill was there, and he realizes this is a moment of opportunity. So he runs up to the father of the bride or the chatan, and he says to him, please, don't say anything. Stay quiet. I need a special bracha from you. Please, give me a blessing for a flash shlema. And he says, what do you do? What? Like, where did he come from? He says, no, please don't say anything. Just give me a blessing for a flash shlema. And at that moment, he got a bracha from this person for a flash shlema, and he had a complete recovery. Amazing. What power there is when a person suffers an embarrassment, how much Hashem considers that moment. If he holds back and instead of pursuing the fight, holds on to himself and doesn't allow things to escalate, the pasuk says, he's like the sun that comes out with all of its strength. It's mighty. He's not a wimp. The opposite. He's so strong and powerful. He's able to hold himself back to tremendous level when somebody suffers embarrassment. But you see what happens in Shamayim when somebody goes through embarrassment, so much so that the plagues would have been knocked out had they spoken disrespectfully to Paro. Now, I want to share with you a very important point in this parasha. We can't go throughout this parasha and not mention it. This parasha is a real exercise in the understanding of midah keneged midah, measure for measure. And I'd like to explain. There's a very clear reason that Chazal give for each and every one of the 10 plagues that were brought upon the Egyptians. Like we said, majority of the plagues are in this week's parasha. And the Midrash explains one by one why it is that each plague was specifically chosen. And I'd like to go through it with you. And this comes from the Midrash Tanchuma. Most of what I'm telling you over here is the Midrash Tanchuma in this week's parasha, Parashat Vaera. It explains. So first of all, we know the pasuk says clearly, Hashem wanted to make the gods of Egypt his first target. So we know, no question, that the Nile River was a god of Egypt. Sheep was a god of Egypt. The sun was a god of Egypt. So all these things were targeted. So therefore the Nile had to be a target of the plagues. The sun had to be a target of the plagues. The sheep actually were targeted in the Passover lamb, right? That's part of the aiming at the gods of the Egyptian. Now, but why was the Nile River plagued with blood specifically? What was the purpose of having it be blood? So over here, it's a very interesting thing. The most simple answer that we know is the idea that, of course, the babies were thrown into the river. So because of the blood of the babies, Hashem made the river into blood. That's the simple answer. But comes along the Midrash Tanchuma and says it's a little bit more than that. The Midrash Tanchuma says that the reason that the Nile River turned into blood was because the Egyptians knew that when a husband and wife are separated because the wife is menstruating, so she can only go back to her husband if she goes to dip in the mikveh. The Egyptians did not want the Jewish people to procreate, to have more children, so they did not allow under any circumstances for a wife to go and dip in the mikveh. Because they prevented the wife from dipping in the mikveh, that's why Hashem, in order to signify the dam nidah, the blood of menstruation, Hashem turned the Nile River into blood in order to make it clear that this is a punishment for the fact that you did not allow the women to become pure from their dam nidah. That's the reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it turn into blood. That's what the Midrash Tanchuma says. Then we have Tzfardea. Why is it that Hashem brought about the plague of Tzfardea specifically with frogs? What's the idea of frogs? Says the Midrash Tanchuma, the Egyptians used to tell the Jewish people, Haviu lanu shkatzim uremasim. Bring for us all kinds of creeping, crawling creatures. Go get me a tarantula. Go get me a lizard. right? Go get me something, maybe not a lizard, some kind of disgusting snail, because of the fact that they would try and make the Jews suffer. Nobody wants to hold on to tarantulas or snails, but they made them do it. So Hashem sent them back something like that, a tzfardea, but not just one tzfardea, but many, many millions of tzfardim that were everywhere they went. Kinim. Why did Hashem give the plague of kinim, specifically lice? Says the Midrash Tanchuma. Part of the terrible torture of the Egyptians was that they made the Jews clean the streets. They used to take brooms and sweep all the streets, and it should be clean of all the dust on the streets. That was their job, and they had to do that all the time. Now, the kinim are very much similar to dust. They're very thin particles like that. So therefore, as a punishment for making the Jewish people sweep the dust of the streets and be the street cleaners, so they had the punishment of kinim. Arov, which means the wild animals. Why was there wild animals that they had to suffer from these bears, lions, etc.? Because the Egyptians used to tell the Jewish people, we want you to go catch us a lion, go catch us a bear. And of course, it's risking their lives, but they made them do it. Either we'll kill you or you go catch us a lion. There's no choice. So because of the terrible predicament they put the Jewish people in, Hashem says, you want lions, you want bears? Here you have lions and bears. Dever, which means that all of the animals drop dead, just random death of animals. Why did that happen? Because they made the Jewish people ro'ei tzon, bakar, gmalim. They made the Jews, again, the goal here was to limit the amount of time that a husband could be with his wife. They didn't want the husbands and wives to procreate, to have more children. So they made the husband be a shepherd out in the middle of nowhere in the desert, on a mountain, in a valley somewhere, far away from his wife, so that he shouldn't be allowed to be with her. And because of that, Hashem said, okay, you want them to watch your animals? All your animals drop dead. But that it was intentional. In other words, everything they were doing had a very particular reason. Now, shchin is boils. Says the Midrash, they used to make the Jewish people heat up water for them and cool off the water for them in order to make sure that they should have hot water, cold water. But now Hashem says, you guys are going to have boils all over your body, and you won't want even one drop of water, hot or cold, to touch it because it's going to be so painful for you. Then barad. Barad means hail. The hail destroyed everything, destroyed so much of the produce in the field. Why? The answer is because they made the Jews work the fields as slaves. They made the Jews plant the vineyards, plant the orchards, and now everything is destroyed by the barad. Arbe, the one thing that was left was the wheat. And the wheat had to be eaten up also. Why? Because who planted that? The Jews. They made the Jews plant all the wheat in the field. So therefore Hashem sent the arbe, which means the locusts, to come and consume every last thing that was left, that was originally planted by the Jews, so that they shouldn't benefit from anything that a Jewish person did. Now, this is also unbelievable. Choshech. Why is it that Hashem brought about the plague of Choshech, that there should be darkness? Why specifically do it this way? So, of course, there is the very first famous reason, which is that we know, it says, V'chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael meretz Mitzrayim. It says that the Jewish people left with weapons when they left Egypt. Now, the Midrash tells us chamushim means that it was 20%. Chamushim means 1/5. 1/5 of the Jewish people left Egypt. Why was it 1/5? Because 80% of the Jewish people died during the plague of Choshech. Scary, scary amount of people. Why? There were a lot of people, explains the Midrash Tanchuma, that they really were not behaving like Jews. They weren't doing what Hashem wanted, and Hashem punished them. But Hashem didn't want the Egyptians to see it, so Hashem brought about the plague of darkness so that nobody should see what's going on. That's one point. Very scary point, but it's what it says. Now, the other point, why should it happen through specifically darkness? Why did the Egyptians deserve to be punished with darkness? The answer is because they used to take Jewish people and they would use them as a human lamp. In other words, the guy wants to sit and eat dinner. He doesn't have any light. He doesn't have any lamp. So he gets himself a Jew and he says, you stand over here and hold the lamp like this. And this Jew has to hold the lamp the entire time while the Egyptian guy is eating his dinner. So because they did that frequently to Jewish people, so they said, you use them for light. Now you're going to have nothing but dark. But what kind of dark? Darkness that you can't move, you can't stand up, you can't sit down. It's a very scary type of darkness, thick darkness. But again, why? Because they did that to the Jewish people. And of course, needless to say, makat bechorot, the slaying of the firstborn sons, of course, that's what they did to all, even more than that, they did to the Jewish people, to all of their baby boys that were killed. Of course, that's what's going to happen to them as well. Abotai, the idea over here is very clear. Midah keneged midah is a very important lesson in Judaism. It means that everything is measure for measure. Everything. Hashem sees what the Egyptians did, and Hashem says, in the same way that you tortured my people, I'm going to torture you. I'm not going to do anything else besides what you did to them. Exactly what you did to them, that's what's going to come to you. But what we take away from this, Rabotai, is that we have to know that it works in the same way towards us. If God forbid, let's say, let's look at it in a positive light rather. Let's say a person needs some motivation to respect his parents, okay? He needs some motivation. So if he knows that everything works midah kineged midah, he knows everything is measure for measure. So then it's going to be easier for him because he knows that if he shows respect to his parents and he's going to make an effort to give them the respect that they deserve, he's going to try and serve them, he's going to try and be there for them, he's going to try and help them, he's going to try and do things for them, then he should know that Hashem is midah kineged midah, measure for measure. It's going to be the same way with his children, that they will respect him and they will try to help him and they'll be there for him. It's going to be measure for measure. That's the idea over here. HaKadosh Baruch Hu always judges everything measure for measure. And therefore, we have to make sure that we do the best that we can, because we should know that Be'ezrat Hashem, we will also be the recipient of exactly what we do. Whatever it is that we do, that's what's going to come back to us. Midah kineged midah. So, Rabotai, this is a very important lesson. We see it all the time. We found it in Bereshit as well. When it came to Yaakov Avinu being away from his father for 22 years, Yosef was away from his father, Yaakov, for 22 years. It's always measure for measure. Comes up all the time. In the same way that you measure, says the Mishnah in Masechet Sotah, that's exactly how Hashem measures for you. And that's a very important thing to remember. And B'ezrat Hashem, we should always measure, do things in a positive way, and B'ezrat Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will repay us as well in a positive way. Rabotai, it's been a pleasure learning with all of you. I want to thank you very much for joining me. B'ezrat Hashem, next week, Tuesday night, 8:45, we're back on, hopefully in person, and God willing, we will be continuing next week. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. Chazakim, have a good night.